There's a reason they call it the devil's hour. At 3 a.m., the world is quiet. Too quiet. Shadows stretch longer, sounds echo louder, and sometimes something appears. Not with a scream or a crash, but with silence. Still, watching, waiting. These are 5 true encounters with silent figures that showed up in the dead of night and left behind fear that never went away. Story 1. The Man Outside the Nursery. A month after bringing her newborn son home, Claire Donnelly started to feel like someone was watching her house. She lived in a quiet Vermont town with her husband, Drew, in a modest 2-story home surrounded by maple trees. It wasn't an isolated cabin in the woods. There were neighbors nearby, families with kids, barking dogs, the occasional lawnmower. But after giving birth, Claire noticed something different about the nights. They felt longer, quieter, like the darkness around their house wasn't just outside, it was pressing in. At first, it was small things, the porch light flickering, the baby monitor glitching with soft static even when it was in perfect signal range, her dog growling at the nursery door. Drew brushed it off. "Old wiring," he said. "The baby's crying's got the dog on edge." But Claire trusted her instincts, and they were telling her something wasn't right. The nursery was on the 2nd floor, facing the backyard. Claire had spent months painting the walls a soft green, setting up the crib, placing little stars above the mobile. She wanted it to feel peaceful. But lately, every time she entered the room at night, she felt unsettled, like she was interrupting something invisible. It all came to a head on a Tuesday morning at 3:03 a.m. Claire was asleep when the baby monitor crackled on the nightstand. Not just the usual whimpers, this was sharp, panicked crying. Her heart jumped. She shot up, grabbed the monitor, and looked, and froze. The screen showed a figure, tall, unmoving, standing beside the crib. The nursery light was off, but there was just enough moonlight to make out the silhouette. It wasn't Drew. The figure was too tall, and its arms hung too low at its sides, like they didn't quite fit. It wasn't doing anything, just standing there. Still. Claire's breath caught in her throat. She looked over at Drew. He was still asleep beside her. She didn't scream. She didn't wake him. She ran. Up the stairs, 2 steps at a time, almost slipping in her socks. She pushed open the nursery door so hard it bounced off the wall. No one was there, just the baby, crying in his crib. The window was locked from the inside. The door had been shut. Claire turned the light on, searching the closet under the crib, behind the door. Nothing. No open windows. No footprints. No sign that anyone had been in the room. She picked up her son and held him to her chest, rocking him, trying to calm the both of them down. When Drew came in a few minutes later, she didn't tell him everything. Just that the baby was crying, and she had a nightmare. He believed her. Why wouldn't he? But she didn't sleep again that night. The next day, she checked the baby monitor footage. Their model had a 24-hour loopback with motion detection. She scrolled to 3:03 a.m., but it was corrupted. A full minute of static. After that, the video resumed, showing her rushing into the room, breathless and wild-eyed. She called the manufacturer, but they had no answers. That shouldn't happen, they said, unless someone physically deleted the segment. Claire didn't tell Drew. She didn't want him thinking she was paranoid. But she started keeping her phone beside the bed, camera ready. She left the nursery light dimmed at night. She installed a lock on the inside of the nursery door, just in case. And every night before going to sleep, she checked the monitor twice, then 3 times. Weeks passed, no more figures. The crying stopped too. Her son began sleeping through the night again. The stillness returned, but not the fear. Claire slowly began to believe it had been stress, exhaustion, hormones, until the monitor flickered again. It was a Thursday. Claire had just finished feeding the baby at 2:50 a.m. She returned to bed, glanced at the monitor, all clear, and drifted off. 13 minutes later, the monitor glowed. The figure was back. Same silhouette, same position, right beside the crib. Only this time, the baby wasn't crying. He was awake, staring up at the man and smiling. Claire didn't run this time. She grabbed her phone, opened the camera, and snapped a photo of the monitor screen. Then she bolted. The hallway felt longer than ever, the air colder. She reached the nursery, threw open the door, empty. Baby giggling softly, no movement, no sound. The door had been locked from the inside again. No one could have entered. No one could have left. She held her son tight. Her hands were shaking. Then she checked the photo. It was clear. Not some blurry glitch, a clear silhouette of a man standing beside the crib. That was the night Claire called the police. 2 officers came, searched the house, questioned both Claire and Drew. They found no signs of forced entry, no footprints in the backyard, no tampering with the monitor system. They were kind, but they clearly didn't believe her. Claire didn't care. She started researching. Paranormal forums, 3 a.m. entities, silent watchers. She found story after story, different places, different people, all describing something similar. A still man who appears beside children, who never speaks, who never moves. One woman in Wisconsin claimed her child started talking to the quiet man at night. Another in Oregon said she saw the figure only through reflections, mirrors, windows, screens, never in person, but always watching. Claire started seeing the figure in her dreams. Not nightmares, just moments. She'd be standing in the nursery and he'd be there across the room, not threatening, not aggressive, just watching, silent. The baby's laughter echoed in the dream. Claire became obsessed. She placed salt around the room, set up motion detectors, switched the monitor brand, burned sage, hung protective charms, consulted a local spiritual healer. Nothing changed. The figure never returned. But Claire never felt safe again. Her son is 2 now, healthy, happy, sleeps through the night. He doesn't remember anything. But sometimes when he's alone in the nursery, Claire hears him giggling. She checks the monitor. There's no one else in the room. But every now and then, he looks directly into the camera and smiles. Story 2, the hooded figure in the garage. When Ethan was 16, he stopped believing in ghosts. Until one summer night, something changed that forever. He lived in a quiet suburb just outside Adelaide, Australia. A normal house, normal family. His dad was a mechanic, his mom a nurse, and his little sister, Mia, was 9 years old and obsessed with baking. They weren't the superstitious type. Ethan didn't scare easy. He watched horror movies with the lights off and laughed through them. That made what happened in July even harder to explain and impossible to forget. It started with a school project. Ethan was building a small motorized cart for his physics class, the kind of thing you needed gears, wiring, and tools for, things his dad kept in their detached garage about 20 meters from the house. He'd been working on it for a week, spending his evenings tinkering out there with music on and the door open to let in the winter breeze. On the night of July 12th, everything was quiet. His mom was on night shift. His dad and Mia were asleep. The sky was clear, the air crisp. Ethan checked the time, 2:48 a.m. Just a few more wires and he'd be done. He decided to make one last trip to the garage. He grabbed a hoodie, slipped on his slides, and walked through the back door with a flashlight. The backyard was dark, but he knew the path. The porch light buzzed behind him, casting long shadows as he approached the garage. It was locked, of course. His dad always insisted. Ethan fumbled with the key, unlocked it, and stepped inside. The garage smelled like engine oil and old rubber. His dad's tools were hung neatly on the walls. Everything was familiar. He flipped on the light and got to work. 15 minutes later, he was crouched beside his half-built cart, connecting wires, when something made him freeze. A soft tap. It came from the window to his left. Not loud, not urgent. Just a tap, like someone lightly touched the glass with a finger. Ethan stood up slowly. The window faced the side of the backyard, partially hidden by overgrown hedges. He figured maybe it was a bird or a possum. Still, something felt off. He walked over to the window and looked out. Someone was standing there, not moving. Not shifting, just standing. The figure was wearing a hooded sweatshirt, black with the hood pulled low. Ethan couldn't see a face, only darkness beneath the hood. The arms hung straight down, no phone in hand, no flashlight, no sound. Ethan's first thought was, prank. But who would be out at 3 a.m. in winter, silently standing in his backyard, behind the garage? He backed away from the window, heart starting to pound. He turned off the light. Darkness swallowed the room. The figure didn't move. For a moment, Ethan considered yelling, calling for his dad. But something inside him, pure instinct, told him to stay quiet, to watch. He crouched low, heart hammering, peeking through the bottom of the window. Minutes passed, 5, then 10. The figure still hadn't moved. It just stood there, facing the garage window, as if it knew Ethan was inside, as if it had always known. Then, at exactly 3:13 a.m., the figure took one step forward. Ethan stumbled back, knocking over a toolbox. The crash echoed through the garage. He sprinted for the door, flung it open, and ran across the yard without looking back. He didn't stop until he was inside. Door locked, leaning against it, gasping. His dad came down the stairs, groggy and confused. Ethan told him someone was in the yard, a hooded guy, just watching. They grabbed a flashlight and searched. Nothing. No one in the yard, no tracks, no sounds. The window showed no smudges. The hedges were undisturbed. You probably scared him off, his dad said. Dumb kids messing around. But Ethan knew it wasn't that. The next morning, while brushing his teeth, he looked down the hall and saw something odd. Tiny footprints, bare, dusty ones, leading from the back door, the one he'd come through, down the hall and stopping right outside his bedroom. They were child-sized. He called his dad again. This time, they both searched the house thoroughly. All doors and windows were locked. No signs of forced entry. No muddy footprints elsewhere. Just that single trail from the door to Ethan's room. Then, nothing. They chalked it up to something Ethan might have stepped in from the garage. But he hadn't been barefoot. He was wearing slides the whole time. That night, Ethan didn't go back to the garage. But at 3 a.m., the backyard floodlight clicked on. He watched from his upstairs window. The hooded figure was back. This time, it wasn't near the garage. It was standing on the patio, closer, still unmoving, still silent. Ethan grabbed his phone and took a photo, but when he checked the image, the figure wasn't there, just an empty patio. He looked up again. It was still there. He blinked. It was gone. For the next 3 nights, the figure returned. Always at 3 a.m., always one step closer to the house. First the garage, then the patio, then the base of the stairs leading to the back door. He never moved on camera. Every time Ethan tried to take a photo, the frame was empty. Yet when he looked with his own eyes, he was there. The 5th night, Ethan didn't sleep. He sat in the hallway with a baseball bat, watching the back door. At 3 a.m., the porch light turned on. But this time, the hooded figure wasn't outside. It was standing in the garage window again, staring in, from the inside. The door had been locked. The keys were inside. Ethan ran to wake his dad. They both went outside, armed this time. His dad, pale and silent, unlocked the garage. Empty. They checked every inch. Nothing. But this time, they noticed something new. On the dusty concrete floor of the garage under the window were prints. 2 small, bare footprints, side by side, as if something had appeared there and never moved. That was the last night Ethan ever entered that garage alone. The figure never returned. But sometimes, when Ethan drives past that house, now sold, now lived in by strangers, he slows down. And every now and then, he swears he sees a shape in the window. Small, still, hooded, just watching. Story 3, The Twins and the Woman in the Corner. In the summer of 2017, the Delgado family moved into an old farmhouse in rural Texas. It sat on 5 acres of dry land, surrounded by brittle trees and barbed wire fences. The nearest neighbor was a half-mile down the road, and the town itself, if you could call it that, was little more than a gas station, a diner, and a church. For Sandra and Luis Delgado, it was exactly what they wanted, a slower life. Space for their twin daughters, Ella and Sophie, to grow up without the chaos of the city, and a mortgage they could finally afford. The farmhouse was built in 1943, creaky floorboards, crooked windows, a cellar that smelled like rain and rust. But it had charm. It had history. And at first, it felt like home. Until the 3rd night. It started with whispers. Ella and Sophie, both 7, had always shared a bedroom. In their previous apartment, they'd often stayed up talking, giggling, inventing stories in the dark. But now their room was different. Larger, colder. The single window faced the backyard, where a dead pecan tree loomed like a skeleton. Their beds were pushed to opposite corners of the room. And between them, the far left corner by the closet, was where the problem began. On that 3rd night, Sandra was woken by Sophie's screaming. She ran down the hall, heart racing, and found Sophie curled up under her blanket, sobbing. "What happened? What's wrong?" Sophie just pointed to the corner. "She was there," she whispered. "The lady." Ella, in her own bed, sat up with wide eyes. "I saw her too, Mommy. She was standing in the corner, just looking." Sandra turned on the light. There was nothing there, just a pile of stuffed animals and an old nightstand. She chalked it up to bad dreams. New house, unfamiliar shadows. Maybe a story they'd made up together. She comforted them, promised to keep the closet closed at night, and left the hallway light on. But the next night, It happened again. Both girls woke at 3 a.m., screaming in sync, pointing to the same spot. "She's back," Ella cried. "She's not blinking." Luis came in this time, furious. "There's no one here. You girls need to stop." He searched the room under the beds inside the closet. Still nothing. Sandra started to wonder, why were they both seeing the same thing? The twins had always been imaginative, yes, but they'd never had joint nightmares. And now it was always the same story. A pale woman, long black hair, white dress, just standing there, watching. By the end of the first week, Sandra was sleeping on a cot in their room. The girls wouldn't sleep unless she was there. But even then, strange things happened. She'd wake to find both girls sitting upright in bed, eyes wide open, staring at the corner. Silent. Shaking. Sometimes, the nightlight would go out at exactly 3 a.m., even when plugged into a surge protector. Once, Sandra saw the stuffed animals slowly topple over by themselves, as if nudged by unseen fingers. Still, there was no proof. Until the camera. Luis, fed up with the sleepless nights, bought a night vision baby monitor and set it up on a shelf in the twins' room. It recorded to an SD card, capturing motion events throughout the night. He was convinced they'd catch one of the girls sleepwalking, or maybe playing a trick. The first 2 nights, nothing. The camera showed the girls tossing, turning, occasionally whispering. But on the 3rd night, the 9th night in the house, they saw her. At 3:01 a.m., the motion alert triggered. The footage showed the twins asleep. Then from the left side of the screen, a figure emerged. A woman. She didn't crawl or walk in. She was already there, just outside the frame. She moved forward an inch and froze. Pale face, long white dress, hair covering most of her features. Bare feet, arms hanging. She didn't blink. She didn't sway. She stood completely still in the corner. For 42 minutes. Then, just as the nightlight flickered out, she stepped backward and disappeared. Luis and Sandra watched the footage in silence. They called the police. The officers came, reviewed the footage, and conducted a full sweep of the house. Every lock was checked. The window in the twins' room was sealed shut. The attic was empty. The basement showed no signs of entry. "You've got a damn good Halloween prank video," one of the officers joked. "But there's no one here." Sandra was furious. "You think I'd fake my kids being terrified every night for 2 weeks?" Luis uploaded the footage to a cloud account and saved it on a USB drive, but when he went back to review the original file, it was gone. Corrupted. The SD card showed an error. No other recordings were affected. That night, Sandra tried to get the girls to sleep in the living room. They refused. "She won't like that," Ella whispered. "Who?" Sandra asked. "The corner lady." Sophie nodded. "She told us we can't leave." The next morning, Sandra found both girls drawing at the kitchen table. Not their usual unicorns or castles, but dozens of near-identical sketches of a woman. The same long black hair, same hollow eyes, same white dress. Each picture showed her in the same position, standing in the bedroom corner. Sandra kept one of the drawings. That evening, she contacted a local spiritual advisor, a woman named Dolores, who had dealt with hauntings in the area. Dolores came the next day, bringing sage, holy water, and an antique silver bell. She walked through the house, paused in the twins' room, and turned pale. "She's here," she said simply. "Who?" Sandra asked. Dolores didn't answer. She rang the bell once. The sound was high-pitched and unnerving. Then she spoke in Spanish, a prayer or a command, and lit the sage. The room seemed to grow heavier. The twins began crying from the hallway. "Is it over?" Luis asked afterward. Dolores looked at them with pity. She was drawn to them. Twins are magnets sometimes. She may leave, but if she's attached, you'll need more than sage. Sandra didn't sleep that night, but the next morning, for the first time in 2 weeks, the girls woke up peacefully. No screaming, no pointing, no mention of the lady. They started sleeping through the night again. A month passed. Sandra began to believe it was over, that Dolores had worked, until one rainy morning in August, when she went into the girls' room to put away laundry. Sophie's notebook was open on the bed. Another drawing. The woman. The corner. But this time, something had changed. She wasn't standing still anymore. She was closer. Halfway across the room, and both twins were asleep in their beds. Sandra stared at the image, her throat tightening. Then she turned the page. The next sketch showed the woman leaning over Ella's bed. The final page? Just 2 words, written in a child's hand. She smiled. Story 4. The thing beneath the streetlight. Kenji Tanaka was used to late nights. Living in a cramped Tokyo apartment and working long hours at a marketing firm meant he often walked home well past midnight. His neighborhood, a sleepy residential stretch in Nerima, was usually quiet by then. A few cats might dart across the road, an old vending machine humming outside a corner shop, the occasional flicker of a TV behind closed curtains. But for the most part, it was still, peaceful, predictable. That's why what happened on the night of October 19th unsettled him so deeply. It was just after 2:40 a.m. when Kenji left the train station. He grabbed a canned coffee from the vending machine, tucked his coat tighter around him, and began the 15-minute walk home. The route was always the same. 3 blocks up, left at the bakery, through a narrow alley that opened into a small park, and then up the hill where his apartment stood overlooking the streetlight. That streetlight had always given him a small sense of comfort. It cast a wide yellow cone of light onto the sidewalk and lit up the entrance to his building. When the sky was cloudy or the moon hidden, it was the only source of light for blocks. That night, as he reached the bottom of the hill, he noticed something. A figure was standing directly beneath the streetlight. From that distance, he assumed it was a neighbor, maybe Mr. Watanabe from across the hall, who sometimes smoked late at night. But as Kenji got closer, he felt the first ripple of unease. The figure wasn't moving. Not a shuffle, not a tilt of the head, just standing there, arms at its sides, facing forward. Kenji slowed down, eyes narrowing. It didn't look quite right. The posture was off, too straight, too rigid. And the clothes, if they were clothes, looked dark and smooth, like they absorbed the light instead of reflecting it. Even stranger, the rain was starting to fall, gently at first, then steadily. Kenji could feel the droplets on his shoulders, saw the glimmer of wet pavement. But the figure beneath the streetlight remained bone dry. That was when he realized something that stopped him in his tracks. He couldn't see a face, not in the shadow of a hood, not behind hair, just blankness, a suggestion of a head, but no features, no detail, just void. Kenji's breath caught in his throat. He looked around. No cars, no people, just the gentle patter of rain. He considered calling out, but something inside screamed, "Don't." So instead, he crossed the street, taking the longer path to his building. As he passed the figure from a distance, it didn't move, didn't turn, didn't flinch. Kenji entered his building and climbed the stairs 2 at a time. When he got to his unit on the 2nd floor, he pulled aside the curtain and looked out the window. The figure was still there, same position, same posture, standing beneath the flickering streetlight. He stared for almost 20 minutes, expecting it to leave, or move, or shift. But it never did. At 4:01 a.m., the light flickered twice, and the figure was gone. No sound, no movement, just vanished. Kenji barely slept. He told himself the mind played tricks when you were tired. Maybe it was someone with an umbrella he didn't notice. Maybe he'd imagined the blank face. Maybe it was all just stress. But the next night, it was back. This time, it was 1 street closer. Not under the usual streetlight, but the one halfway up the hill. Again, standing completely still. Again, blank. Again, dry in the pouring rain. Kenji stood frozen at his window. It didn't move all night. When he looked again at 4 a.m., it was gone. He told himself not to go to work the next day, to call someone. But who would he call? The police? What would he say? That a stranger kept standing under lights at night? That it didn't get wet? That it had no face? By the 3rd night, Kenji felt like he was losing his mind. He stayed up, waiting. At exactly 3 a.m., the figure appeared, now directly in front of his building, under the streetlight, looking, if you could call it that, right up at his window. Kenji felt cold creep up his spine. He turned off all the lights, backed away from the window, but curiosity overpowered fear. He peeked again and screamed. The figure was no longer under the streetlight. It was at the entrance to his building. He heard no footsteps, no door opening. But something told him, it's coming up. Kenji grabbed a knife from the kitchen, locked his front door, pushed a chair against it. His phone was in his hand, but he didn't call anyone. What would he even say? He sat on the floor, trembling, staring at the door. 3:12 a.m., 3:26 a.m., nothing. And then, just as he began to think maybe it had left, the hallway light flickered, once, twice, then total darkness. The bulb in his apartment buzzed and dimmed, and for a brief second, he heard breathing. Not loud, not labored, just breathing. On the other side of the door, shallow, calm, then silence. Kenji didn't move until sunrise. The next morning, he found the hallway light bulb shattered. No one in the building had seen or heard anything. No strange figures, no visitors. But something else had changed. On the street outside, beneath the streetlight, he saw it. A small, black smear on the sidewalk, like ash or soot, a perfect human-sized outline, almost like someone had stood there so long they left a mark. Kenji moved out within a week. He didn't break his lease. He didn't leave a forwarding address. He just packed 2 bags and left. He never walked home at 3 a.m. again. Story 5. The reflection that wasn't his. For most of his adult life, Lucas Weber didn't believe in anything supernatural. He was a software engineer living alone in Berlin, meticulous and logical, the kind of man who needed every light switch to be centered, every tab on his browser neatly organized. Ghosts? Paranormal stories? He considered them a byproduct of overactive imaginations and too much caffeine. But in March of 2022, something happened in his apartment that shattered every piece of that certainty. It began with a late night. Lucas had been working overtime on a tight deadline. His eyes ached from the screen and his neck was stiff. At 2:47 a.m., he finally decided to stop, closed his laptop, and headed to the bathroom to brush his teeth. The bathroom was small, typical of older Berlin apartments. A cracked tile near the sink, a squeaky cabinet door. The mirror was large, set into the wall above the sink, with a pale fluorescent light humming softly above it. He picked up his toothbrush, leaned over the sink, and froze. His reflection was standing upright. He was bent forward in real life, head lowered to the tap. But in the mirror, he was still straight, head lifted, eyes open, looking directly at him. He blinked hard. His reflection blinked after him. Not simultaneously, after, a full half-second delay. He jerked upright, heart hammering. Now, the reflection matched him again, standing, wide-eyed, tense. He didn't move, neither did the reflection. He slowly raised his left hand. The reflection followed, a little slower than normal, but otherwise correct. He opened his mouth. So did it. Maybe he was just overtired, delirious. He turned off the light, walked out of the bathroom, and poured himself a glass of water. But he didn't sleep. That image of his reflection watching him when he wasn't looking kept replaying. He chalked it up to sleep deprivation. The next night, it happened again. Same routine. Late work, toothbrush, bathroom. Only this time, the reflection didn't smile when he did. Instead, it stared. Cold. Expressionless. Lucas forced a grin. His reflection did not respond. He backed out of the bathroom and shut the door. The next day, he bought a new mirror, removed the old one, tossed it in the basement. Problem solved. But it wasn't. 2 nights later, as he passed by his bedroom window, he saw it again. Not outside. In the reflection. His reflection was standing in the darkened window, even though Lucas himself was already in bed, sitting upright, blank-faced, silent. He turned on the lights. Nothing there. He turned them off, and it was back, watching from inside the glass. He took a photo, but when he looked at the image, it was normal. No one there. He stopped sleeping altogether after that. He covered every reflective surface in his apartment, mirrors, windows, even the kettle. Every night, he sat in the living room with the lights on and the curtains closed, listening for sounds. Because the reflection wasn't just visual anymore. It started knocking. At first, faint, a soft tap, tap, tap from the bathroom mirror, even though it was no longer on the wall. Then, louder, coming from the window at 3 a.m. sharp. No one was outside. No footprints in the snow, no disturbances, just the sound. Always 3 knocks. Always followed by silence. Then came the voice, not from outside, from inside the mirror. The first time, it whispered his name, Lucas. He screamed, threw a lamp at the bathroom door. When he finally opened it, everything was quiet, but the words were still echoing in his head. He went to a doctor, told them he hadn't slept, that he was hearing things. They prescribed him sleeping pills, told him to rest, stay away from caffeine, get sunlight. But none of that mattered, because the reflection, his reflection, had become something else. It didn't mimic anymore. It acted independently. He'd catch glimpses in shiny surfaces, its mouth moving when his was shut, its eyes watching when his were closed. One night, as he was brushing his teeth, he dared to test it. He raised his right hand slowly. The reflection did nothing. He waved it. Still nothing. Then, the reflection raised its hand, the left one, and waved back mockingly. That night, he took every reflective object and smashed them. He taped black cloth over every window, removed the screen of his laptop, turned off his phone, lived by candlelight for 3 nights. But it found new ways, in puddles, in his coffee, in the shine of a doorknob. The worst moment came on the 5th night. He was asleep on the couch, finally passed out from exhaustion, when he woke with a start. It was 3 a.m. He heard his own voice whispering from the kitchen. He got up slowly, terrified, and looked around the corner. The oven door, reflective, black glass, showed him standing in the kitchen. But he wasn't. He was standing in the hallway, watching himself being watched. Then the reflection smiled. Not a warm smile, a knowing one, and pointed directly at Lucas. He blacked out. When he woke up, it was morning. Sunlight spilled through the curtains. Everything was quiet. He ran to the oven. Nothing there. He threw a blanket over it and packed a bag. He moved out that same day. The landlord didn't ask questions, probably because Lucas looked like a ghost himself, pale, twitching, unshaven. He found a studio apartment across the city, high up in a building with small windows and no mirrors. For a while it helped, but last month something changed. He was walking past a shop window downtown when he glanced at the reflection and saw himself, just a beat too late. Then, behind the glass version of himself, something moved, something wearing his face. But the eyes were black, completely black, and it smiled again. Lucas doesn't know what it is. He doesn't know where it came from. But he's learned something since that first night. Reflections are not always yours. Sometimes, they're just waiting for the moment you stop watching. They never spoke. They never screamed. They never chased anyone through the dark. But maybe that's what makes them worse. Because in the silence, in that still suffocating 3 a.m. quiet, something else speaks louder. The stare that doesn't break. The shadow that doesn't belong. The reflection that isn't yours. And when the clock strikes again tomorrow, you might wake up and see them too. Already watching. Already waiting. And still completely silent.